So chapter 4, the renunciation of action in wisdom, jnana karma sannyasa yoga. So the first part of this chapter, which we started last week, talks about the self being the eternal teacher, right? So what we discussed, in fact, the word Vedanta, as most of you, if not all, know, Veda means knowledge, wisdom, and Anta means the end, the culmination. So the culmination of wisdom is enlightenment, the self. That's the goal of Vedanta. That's what Vedanta talks about. And this self is the same in the past, present, future. It is the consciousness which was, is, always will be. So all beings, past, present, and future, are enlivened by that same consciousness. Just as all creation in this universe, in this earth at least, past, present, future, will be sustained by the same sun. The sun is the enlivening principle physically. The consciousness is the enlivening principle spiritually. It's the consciousness within that makes you conscious of whatever. So, any period in history, when a person was enlightened, they became one with that same consciousness. And they teach us from that experience. So that's what Krishna is saying. Krishna was a person who was born and died at a particular time. But he says in the first verse, I taught this to the sun. The sun taught it to the first human ancestor. The first human ancestor taught it to the first king. So that's what it means. If you don't understand that, you get highly confused. What is he trying to say? So that same enlightenment is experienced. So to the extent the person has gained that enlightenment, they can communicate the knowledge. So it's the same knowledge, regardless of the person. That's what he's trying to say. So this was handed down. In verse 2, he says, the Guru Shishya Parampara, Parampara Praptam Evam. And the golden age was when not only the philosophers knew the knowledge, even the kings who led the society were led by the knowledge. You can't have a better age than that, where enlightened souls not only direct personally the disciples, but the people who direct society themselves follow that knowledge. Raja Rishis, the king sages. So now the whole thing is inverted. There is neither any knowledge nor anybody following it. So the whole thing is purely self-centered, which is destroying everything. Even by the time of Krishna, he says, by long lapse of time, this has been lost. So right from the early Vedic age, from the Rig Veda till Krishna, was itself at least 1500 to 2000 years, minimum 1500, which is a long time. So the righteousness had gone down. That's what he says. By long lapse of time. This is Krishna's time. You can imagine now, there's no point keeping count on. Because, so, even those days, the leadership had lost the connection with the knowledge. So, society was in a pretty bad shape by the Kauravas and all their, associates. But regardless of the societal condition. That's what I was telling you last week. What you must understand is the individual redemption is always there. So, regardless of what society is doing, each one of you has the capacity to gain even the highest if you put your heart and soul into it. So he says, this same ancient yoga, this is the third verse, has been imparted to you by me, for you are my devotee. Devotee in the sense a person who surrenders in devotion. So surrender is the first qualification for gaining knowledge. You must understand you don't know. Only then will you humble yourself in front of a person who knows. Now you believe you know everything, what is the chance? So Arjuna had surrendered at the beginning of the second chapter. If you remember that far back. He had surrendered, right? He said, I don't know what I'm talking. And that's when the sermon started. And you're also a friend. They're not only are they friends, they're best friends since childhood. And cousins. They're cousins, related. So he says, what else do you want? You have that additional advantage as well. That trust is there. And this indeed is the supreme secret. So why this knowledge is so difficult to convey is because it's a secret in the sense it is not a physical perception which you can show somebody. It is not an emotion which you can make somebody feel. When you go around people, the emotion of anger comes up, right? When you show yourself to people, right? They're all angry, no? Most people, especially your spouse, you show yourself. You can make them experience emotions. That's not a problem. But you can't make them experience the self because it's not an emotion. And even though Vedanta gives you the highest knowledge, the self is not an object of knowledge. It can't be captured in thoughts. Vedanta only points you in that direction. So this is the supreme secret, that which is unknowable by the body, mind, intellect. Other secrets you can know, right? If you can open the vault where Coca-Cola keeps its formula, you can know that secret. It's not there is a way to know it, right? But this you can't open any vault. You have to go beyond your body, mind, intellect to reach the self. So he says, this supreme, and why it's supreme is until you get to the state of enlightenment, you will never ever be peaceful and happy. Victor Hugo says that in Les Miserables, he says, the perfect smile belongs to God alone. The perfect smile. In the sense, only when you get to enlightenment, the state of Godhood, are you in supreme bliss, which cannot be taken away. It's permanent. In this world, you'll have spasms of happiness, but it's all passing. Ultimately ending in old age and death. Everything is taken away. It's usurped. Anything you have. It's just, first of all, it can't satisfy you because it's temporary. Even that temporary will be taken away. Just a question of time. So yesterday I was reading tennis, So Novak Djokovic lost his third successive match. Who was the world number one, was. And it's the first time that's happened since 2018. Can you imagine? And he says this is the reality. The body is wearing away. And how old is he? Not 67. He's 37. In fact, that itself is too long. He's been the exception to the rule because he's so talented. So that speed gets half a second slower, that's enough. The young fellows will destroy you. That's what they're doing. Sad to see. But it's a reality. None of these fellows are prepared for that. So the supreme is that which cannot be taken away, which is the self. So anything you get in the world, it's passing. And any problem you solve, the next one comes. There's no such thing. That's why he says the perfect smile belongs to God alone. Bhumayeva sukham na alpa sukham asti, says the Upanishads. These are the commandments. Bhumayeva means infinite. The infinite alone is bliss. There cannot be bliss in anything finite. How is it possible? So this is the supreme secret. Not secret, supreme secret. You must understand each word, what it means. Rahasyam etat uttamam, the supreme secret. Clear? So any questions before we proceed to verse 4? Yes, Alok.
Gautamji, in verse 2, the 4 ways of gaining knowledge. So direct perception, it seems like firstly that only applies to relative knowledge and it doesn't require any thinking, it's immediate. So the question is, how is the intellect important in each of those 4 ways, and how is it different for relative versus absolute knowledge?
No, he's talking about these are the 4 ways of understanding anything, gaining any knowledge, right? Your intellect has to be applied even in direct perception. What do you mean it doesn't? See, animals directly perceive. They can't analyze what is happening. They perceive rain and they go for cover. They can't analyze why does it rain? What is humidity? How do the clouds come? This is direct perception. So through direct perception, you make a conclusion. That also requires intellect. And sometimes you can't directly perceive, so you understand through inference. That's what he's saying. You can't see smoke, but you can't see fire. There's smoke. You can infer, right? That's a typical example. Comparison. You know one thing, you don't know the other thing, but through comparison, you can understand. So that's what he's saying. Now, Vedantic knowledge is also handed down. It cannot be through perception. You can understand the concepts through inference and comparison. But if somebody has understood the truth before, that is called tradition and is explaining that truth to you. So you have to uncover the logic and reason in what they are saying. But it's been handed down. It's not somebody originally discovered it. Right? That's what he's trying to explain. So Vedanta has the added power of being verified and re-verified by galaxies of sages and saints for thousands of years. So that tradition part of it is very powerful. It's not just, unless somebody proves it. It's not like that. It has that backing. That's what he's trying to say. You understand? It's been tried and tested. In that sense, it's different from the rest. And even Pratyaksha, in fact, in one of the verses in the Gita, he says that Pratyaksha Avagamam, this knowledge it's like perception, directly realizable. So, in the sense, as you move towards the self, it's not you got to wait till enlightenment. You get commensurate peace and happiness, which you're experiencing. And that experience encourages you to go deeper. So it will take some time, but once you all find yourselves becoming clear in your thinking, peaceful, things that used to bother you don't, relatively. With absolute, you're enlightened. You will find that extremely encouraging, and that will encourage you to go deeper. So there is a perception, there is a direct experience, even though you don't know the self. In that sense, you get it? Verse 4.
Arjuna uvacha aparam bhavato janma param janma vivasvataha kathametad vijagiyam tvamadau proktavaniti.
Arjuna said, later was your birth, earlier the birth of Vivaswan. How then am I to understand you taught this in the beginning? So again, I already explained this. So Arjuna is obviously confused. He's known Krishna as his cousin and friend. They've grown up together. And suddenly he's saying, I taught this to Vivaswan, the son. The son taught it to the first human. I mean, this is what Arjuna couldn't be impolite. So he says, he didn't say, what are you talking? He says, Vivaswan was born, I don't know how many millions of years ago. You are here with me. What are you saying? How then am I to understand? So the truth is, only a realized soul can completely communicate the knowledge. And the knowledge that they're communicating is the same, regardless of the person who's realized it. So what the Upanishads are saying thousands of years ago is the same thing what the Gita is saying, is the same thing what a current enlightened soul would be saying if they are enlightened. They're not saying anything different. That's what he's trying to say. Buddha also said, I am the teacher of countless bodhisattvas in bygone ages. He didn't say anything different. In fact, people believe Buddhism is a different religion. Buddha only spoke Vedanta. He was only against the addiction to the rituals which had happened in those days, to the Vedic rituals. That is nothing new. In fact, the Gita itself was written for that reason. If you remember in the second chapter, he himself says in the Gita that people are addicted to the Vedic rituals. Yam imam pushpitam vacham. They have become attached to the flowery speech of the Vedas, not understanding the meaning. In fact, you go back, even the Upanishads had to be written. Earlier, they were not part of the Vedas. The Vedas only consisted of the public rituals and prayers. The Upanishads had to be added because people lost the meaning of the prayers, the rituals. The Upanishads themselves, they are so sarcastic, I can't tell you. In one of the earliest Upanishads, he says that a dog came to me and said, Om, give me food. Om, give me water. Om, give me a house. He's talking about a priest. You understand? He's equating them who's interested in material and sensual interest, not real teaching, who's not understood anything. This is how they talk. The Upanishads. So this is the problem, and in fact today also is the same thing. So you got to understand what it means. The knowledge is exactly the same. The person communicating it may be different. So the biggest problem in human history has been people get attached to the person. They get fanatic about the person communicating it rather than trying to understand what are they saying. That's all these different religions and factions and sects and creeds all over the place. India itself, the knowledge is supposed to be the same. You'll be shocked. Amount of factions and demarcations, unbelievable. Vaishnava, Shaiva, Shaivite, Advaitite, Vashishtadvaitite, Dvaita. I mean, it'll go on and on. Mimamsa, Sankhya. And nobody knows what the meaning is. It's all the same. So, he's saying it's the same thing. And the second part is, it is Sanatana Dharma. Another word for Vedanta is Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal principles. They don't change with time, person, place. It's like gravity is an eternal physical principle. It doesn't matter who found it, it will never change from person to person, time and place. It's eternal, that's it. So he's saying this knowledge has been communicated since eternity, regardless of the person. So Arjuna obviously doesn't understand. So again, he explains now in verse 5, which again you have to understand. Totally misunderstood.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha Bahuni me vyatitani Janmani tavacharjuna Tanyam veda sarvani Natvam veda parantapa.
The blessed Lord said, many births of mine and yours have passed. O Arjuna, I know them all while you know not, O Parantapa. So again, now if you read this, first of all, the Gita talks in a dual tongue. Because the Gita, as compared to the Upanishads, emphasizes Krishna as a self-realized soul. The Upanishads talk of the supreme reality, regardless of the person. So they found by the time of the Gita that people are no longer able to relate to a formless reality. So they need a form to inspire them, which was Krishna. But philosophically speaking, he's an enlightened soul like many before him. In fact, he declares so many places in the Gita. Bhavo jnana tapasa puta madbhavam agataha. By this, purified by this fire of knowledge, many have attained my state. He says that. But devotional people can't handle that. So they need a form, Krishna. So they need verses like this. He knows everything that is happening to us. We don't know anything. They're happy with that. They need that. It's nothing wrong. They need that reassurance. But this class is meant for the intellectual caliber of people, which I believe all of you want the logic and the reason behind how to live your life, right? So what does this verse mean? Even that this is true. So what Krishna is saying is, I know that pure consciousness which has enlivened all human beings in the past, present, future. You don't know it. You're still ignorant. So, what is life? This consciousness within you, this God principle within you is now covered by ignorance. And ignorance manifests as desires. You become ignorant of the Atman, the self within you. What happens? None of us know the self, right? So what has happened? What happens? And the minute you become ignorant of the self, what happens? See, self is the state of infinite bliss, completeness. Not self means not complete, incomplete, void, dissatisfaction. So our default state is sorrow, which you don't understand. Because if I ask you, how are you? I'm fine. I'm fine. Family is also fine. Mother, father doing very well. See, spiritual, complete ignoramus. Now what can anybody say? The truth is the fact that you're not enlightened, you're in sorrow. You're just acclimatized to it. Like a slum dweller born in a slum is acclimatized to that living. They don't know. So, since we are unfulfilled, our thoughts go to the world to try and fill this void. This is called desire. And you need a body to fulfill your desires. This is called birth. Avidya, kama, karma. Ignorance, desire, action. So when you die, 99.999% chance when you die. Dying is 100%. So you think, no, I have 0.00. No. When you die, chances are you have desires. You're not enlightened. So what will happen? Those desires will need expression. They will need another body to fulfill. This is the cycle of birth and death. It's called samsara, the worldly entanglement. So Krishna is saying many births, yours, mine. In fact, to be a human being itself is a culmination of evolution. You can't go higher. Because human being alone has intellect to realize the self. No other animal, no creature can even come close in that sense. So only when you hit self-realization, there's no ignorance. Therefore, there's no desire. There's no need for birth. You are reached the immortal self. This is the cycle of life. So what Krishna is saying is the same consciousness which enlivened your past, which enlivened my past, even the past of a worm in the ground. Even the worm in the ground is conscious, right, of the mud around it. The minute there's rain, what happens? All the earthworms come up. You see them, right? Where are all of them? They were under the ground. But they're conscious of the water. They're conscious. The minute they're conscious of the water, the mind says move up and they crawl. That same consciousness. So he's not saying a self-realized soul knows what the worm is conscious of. He's saying he's become that same consciousness which enlivens everything. So see how you can misunderstand. But for the devotional, yes, Krishna knows everything. We don't know. They're happy with that. It doesn't mean that. And in fact, that's what he explains now. Because you'll be saying, how are you saying that? It's exactly what he says in the 6th verse. He says, by my own maya, by my own illusory power, I manifest. Which is the same for all beings. You have manifested through that same Maya, that same illusion. Yeah, Saurabh, you had something?
Yeah, Hariom Kazamji, I'm not able to understand why he says many worth of mind. Well, it's a self-realized soul.
Yeah, so before self-realization, right? It's not immediate. So he says, so many, suppose you gain enlightenment, Saurabh becomes Saurabh Swami, suppose, I'm not, you will say the same thing. Many have passed, this life I have completed it, right? So that's all he's trying to say.
Ajopi sannavyayaatma bhutanamishvaropi san prakritim swamadhishtaya sambhavamyatma mayaya.
Though unborn, of imperishable nature and Lord of beings, presiding over my own Prakriti. Prakriti means matter. I am born by my own Maya power. Now, again, you have to carefully analyze what he's trying to say. So, Lord refers to the self within, the conscious principle. Ishvara, which he calls here. So, what is the Lord of this universe? If you analyze also, see this table is just dead matter, right? This body is also dead matter. But what is the difference between this body and this table? This body contains that incredible concept, not concept, that incredible manifestation that it's conscious. I touch my finger to the table, I'm conscious it's a table. I touch it to a glass of water, I know the difference between table and water. It's conscious. So, what is the Lord of this world is consciousness. No scientist, no nothing has ever come close to even understanding consciousness because it's transcendental. So, the whole thing they get stuck there. Everything else we know. What is matter? What is this? Where did the consciousness come from? How did it become aware? Conscious. In fact, that's the first question in the Upanishads. Kena. Kena means by whom? Kene shitam patati preshitam manaha. How did that mind first, by whom impelled did the mind first become conscious? Kena prana prathama praiti yukta. How did that breath first start? So, that's the Lord, the consciousness. So, the pure consciousness, he says, it is unborn, means it is beyond birth and death. Imperishable, it is unchanging, immortal. So, the consciousness is that immortal, unchanging, permanent, all blissful, infinite principle, the absolute reality. The fourth state, beyond waking dream, deep sleep. This is the state of consciousness. And that is what you are. Now, the beauty is that is you. You are that. Whole Vedanta cries out, you are not this powerless little piece of flesh. You are that supreme being. And you have the capacity to get it. Now, why are you wasting your time? That's the whole. But will my children come along? Now, what can you talk to? You can't understand. You just can't. So even though I am unborn, imperishable and the Lord, how did I come into this? Now that's what you have to ask yourself. You say I, don't say there's a Lord, there's a... How did you come into this wretched limitation? How? By my own prakriti, by my own maya. See, there's an ocean, right? And then there's a wave. So the ocean is unborn. In the sense, it's not manifest as a wave. It's imperishable. It's always there. The wave comes and goes. But the fact that the ocean is so large itself projects the wave. See, a bucket of water doesn't have a wave. Your swimming pool in your backyard doesn't have a wave, right? Far more than one bucket of water. But an ocean has waves because it's so huge. Even a huge lake will have a wave. The size is so much. A small lake won't. You go to Lake Michigan, Chicago, there'll be waves there. Interesting. But the lake here in your park here, there's no lake, there's no waves there. Why? So that's its own maya, its own nature, as it were. So similarly, friends, as long as something exists, now coming to the actual philosophy, as long as an object exists, there's always a possibility not to recognize the object as the object. And that quality is inherent in the existence of the object itself. See, as long as there's a rope in your garden, the fact that the rope exists, there's a possibility not to recognize the rope as a rope. There's a possibility, no? And when you don't recognize the rope as a rope, what do you see? You see it as a snake. Illusion. This is called Maya, my own Maya. So even though I am enlivening this matter, presiding over my own prakriti, there is still the possibility not to recognize me as myself. And this misapprehension is Maya. So it is incredibly profound, but if you break it down, it's not that difficult. That's why you have to use examples. As long as a rope exists, it is the nature of the rope, not for you not to recognize the rope as a rope. Right? As long as there's a boulder, there's a possibility not to recognize the boulder as a boulder. Therefore, you see an elephant where there's a big boulder. Right? So as long as there's this infinite self, there's a possibility not to recognize the self as the self. And therefore, we see it as this world. That's what has happened. This is called Maya, illusion. Now the problem is, the illusion itself is so attractive that we get completely caught up in it. That's the whole problem. So rare indeed is the one who can withstand that attraction, that attachment, and find the self underlying it. That is the whole spiritual path. So he says, even though I am unborn, imperishable and Lord, I'm still born. by my own, because of this possibility.
The example of the ocean and the wave, where we see where there are waves in an ocean and not in a pond. Is it trying to explain the infinite nature of the Brahman? Is that what
infinite nature of the Brahman? Yes, that's what we're trying to say. Where there's little bit of water, there's no wave. Where there's medium amount of water, there's no wave. But when there's a huge amount of water, there's a wave. Just an example. See, same thing. When there's one tree, will you get scared? When there's 10 trees, will you get scared together? 100 trees, you won't. But when there's a forest, you're terrified to go into the forest. It's just trees and trees and trees. But the sheer amount of trees creates the fear, brings in something else. The sheer amount of water brings in that gravitational pull of the wave. The sheer infinitude of Brahman, the reality, brings in this world. In that sense. But I've given the explanation. It's nothing to do with the infinitude. That's one way of looking at it. But the fact that an object exists itself projects the possibility not to recognize the object as it is. Therefore, you project illusion. This is called Maya. Ma means not, yaha, that. Maya, that which is not.
So, if he's born in whose perception?
Born in your own perception, not in my perception. What do you mean born?
Well, when he's saying that, I'm born out of the Maya, out of my own power of Maya. He's born out of, in whose perception is he born?
In his own perception, your own ignorance, you're born, right?
What about him?
Same thing. He's giving the same thing. He's also a human being who's there, right? So he's making you understand how it happens. You worry about yourself. You have to understand from that infinite that you are, how did you become the finite? This is the process. So Krishna is a person who has overcome that ignorance. That's the difference between him and you. So you have to work on overcoming it. That's it. Yes, sir.
So Gautamji, is Maya the illusion and Prakriti out here are vasanas?
Yes, Prakriti is always vasanas. Matter is nothing but vasanas, right? Vasana means ignorance. Prakriti, ignorance. Thought, desire and action are further manifestations of ignorance. But ignorance is Prakriti, matter. Matter further manifests as thoughts, desires and actions, the world. Clear? So you remove the underlying ignorance. That's it. You get into the fourth state. You overcome this illusion.
So body, mind, intellect is part of Prakriti.
Yes. I just told you, vasanas, ignorance creates the subject, which is body, mind, intellect, and the object, which is the world. Both are a projection of ignorance of the self. You remove ignorance of the self, it's gone. Only consciousness remains. See, imagine colorless light going through a prism. You all know, remember that experiment you did as kids. What comes out of the prism, the glass prism? The 7 Vibgaric colors, right? The rainbow comes out. It's the light. All those 7 colors, beautiful colors, is nothing but white light. Right? But it's the white light passing through a prism. It's not just white light. So if you remove that prism, what happens? light remains in its original form. So consciousness is the white light. This prism is this ignorance. Right? You remove that ignorance, what remains is consciousness. And like I told you yesterday, somebody was asking, it is impossible to understand while you are in ignorance. So when you remove the ignorance of the dream, what happens? You wake up. Where's the dream? The only way to understand that is the dream. You're dreaming, right? You have a dream, body, mind, intellect. You have a world. Whatever has caused the dream, when it's removed, in other words, when you wake up, what happens to the dream? It's gone. But why are you not able to wake up? Ignorance, yes. But what does that ignorance cause?
Desires and
Attachment. That's it. Sangam karanamapadam. Attachment is the cause of all the calamities. Apadam means calamity. See, you're so attached to this that it is impossible to. So the more you become detached, then you'll be able to understand. There is something that underlies all this. So much attachment, so powerful, accumulated over lives and lives. Trust me. So it's impossible to see. So Vishnu and Narada, right, were walking. It's in the Puranas, the story. To explain to the public, layperson, what is Maya. So Narada tells Vishnu is the self, Narada represents the individual. That's all, this is the symbolic. Vishnu, I understand everything you taught me about the world and all, but this Maya, I can't understand. Bas udhar hi to maar kha gaye. That's the main thing of Vedanta. And he said, I understand the whole Vedanta, but Maya I don't understand. What have you understood then? That is Vedanta. So Vishnu said, yeah, I know it's difficult to understand. And then they are walking and Narada suddenly sees most beautiful woman he's ever seen. And what happens? Gone. Clean bowled. Middle stump out of the ground. Right? Strike out. Americans is strike out. Cricket is clean bowled. Whatever. And he goes in, he says, this woman is the one I have to marry. And he goes into the house and asks the father to marry her, permission. Father welcomes him, even though he's another poverty-stricken fellow, poor fellow. So he's thinking no chance, right? Because such a beautiful woman and such a nice house, how can I have a chance? So he says, I give you my permission. He says, I can't believe it. Why? How come? Nobody's asked for her hand. See, a lot of people have asked, but when I give the condition, they all run away. Condition is, you have to stay here with me because she's my only daughter. Narada says, that is no problem for me. I was wondering where I'm going to stay. Now you sort that problem out. He's a wanderer, So, 2 in 1, right? House and wife. So he stays and he becomes a big guy. He's expanding his lands and he's has 2-3 children also. And everything's going fabulous. And one day there's a huge flood. And everything is getting swept away. His house is gone. Such a massive flood in that area. And he's holding on to his wife and children. And the children are going away. They can't hold them. And the wife goes, and suddenly Narada says, Vishnu, where are you? And Vishnu was right there. What happened? They were walking, no? You also all got involved. What happened? Such a nice, when am I also going to get a wife with a house also? All that. Vishnu says, I'm right here. Now you understand what is Maya. So, it's just a temporary delusion. Dirgha samsara rogasya vicharo hi maha aushadam. He says this long dream of worldly existence, this long disease, only vichara. Vichara means constant contemplation is the only cure. That's why you have to study every morning. Constantly understand, think, what is this? What am I going through? What is beyond all this? What is the purpose? Why am I here? Nobody does that. Soon as the day opens, your mind is a flood of thoughts. My job, my wife, my children, my this, you're gone. Attachment. So it's almost impossible. This is Maya. It overcomes you and you're so caught up in it. But remember, you have nothing to do with it. It's not you. Just an assumed identity. Akhinam shanamasinam pashya samsara natakam. For a moment, just stand apart and look at this illusion, this play on a stage called the world. Chidananda ghana swachha atmanam cha vibhavayet. Think of that consciousness, that bliss that pervades all this, underlies all this. Evam sthasyasi nityam. If you can remain like this all the time, bhava samsara sagarat, you have crossed the sea of worldly existence. So if you can remain just apart, understanding, no, this is not it. This is all just consciousness. Then you've crossed the world. Now who's there? So he says start with at least one moment. Early morning when you're with your books, think about that. And as soon as you stop your study, the world will overcome you, right? All of you have that, no? Those of you who are trying, studying, you know that. But you have to keep at it. Slowly it becomes less and less. The hold of the world over you. So this Maya is the most powerful force which you have to fight. Yes, you had something, Praveen?
Yeah, I see that Maya is being translated as both power and illusion. And it's also being said it's my own power. So, is it saying that it's a powerful illusion that I created? Is that what Krishna is saying? I'm not able to reconcile.
Power in the sense, the ignorance causes the illusion, right? Because you don't see the rope, you're ignorant of the rope, you see a snake. So what has caused the snake? It's not that the snake is born or there's some independent creation. It is your own ignorance. That's what he says, my own power. So as long you are the consciousness, within you is the capacity to become ignorant of yourself.
So even he is acknowledging his own limitation.
Anybody who's born, you see, he's talking from your point of view. He's trying to educate us.
Okay.
He's overcome the ignorance, which is why we are learning from him. How to overcome it.
Thank you.
So it's a transferred epithet. He's trying to tell us what is going on within us, right? But it's true. The fact that he's born, there has to be the same ignorance. You overcome it, that's a different matter.
So this knowledge of Advaita Vedanta, can that be any experience at your self-realization? Because it seems like self is unknown and the state is unknown. So I, individual being, needs to attain that state. So it feels like a separation. So it's something apart from me.
Yes.
So how is that only that knowledge of that one will only be realized only at that state?
Yes, of course. See, it's like your question is, the self is separate from me. There's me and the self.
Yeah.
So how will I become one with the self? When you remove that which is causing the separation, which is ignorance. It is ignorance which causes the separation, right? So you remove that, you become one with the self. So it's like when you're dreaming, you're separate from the waker. But only when you wake up from the dream will you become one with the waker, right? Till then you'll be separate. So the dream happens unconsciously. You wake up, it ends. This you have to put in conscious effort to make it end. That is Vedanta. That is the whole spiritual path.
When you say remove the ignorance, is it the same as saying remove attachment?
Remove ignorance. What does it mean? Yes,
Is it the same?
ignorance you can't handle directly because ignorance is deep sleep. Pure ignorance is the state of deep sleep. What can you do there? Ignorance you can only tackle through its manifestation. What did I say ignorance manifests as? Desire. Attachment is nothing but desire. So you have to tackle the attachment, the desire. And how do you tackle desire? By understanding what is higher than the desire, which is knowledge. Knowledge of the self. Therefore, gain the knowledge. Remove the ignorance. So I know this is a lot to handle. So it has to settle in. So take some time. You can always review the recordings, right? Suppose you have something on the YouTube, it gets uploaded in a day or two. So review it. This whole lecture, it's important. And if there's any questions, we can take it up next time. In fact, you can send in your questions. This Wednesday, we'll have the Q&A session as usual. We're back to our usual. So we'll see you then. Hari Om.